violence complainants and victims in this manner for years, decades. And I believe this is what happened actually with the case I'm talking about, the case of Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell. In one of the newspaper reports, it speaks about how, at around the same time, or presumably somewhat before, the women congregants, board members, reported Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell's alleged sex crimes to the police. There was an attempt by the Unitarian Universalist Church, and I do believe it wasn't just local. I believe it was almost certainly the UUA itself, the Unitarian Universalist Association, the corporate headquarters, as it were, of Unitarian Universalism. They tried to initiate a so-called confidential investigation. So a confidential investigation almost certainly would have included this practice of having the complainants, the victims, sign a confidentiality agreement. And I do believe this was an attempt by the Unitarian Universalist Association to try and conceal everything. But that attempt to conceal everything through confidentiality agreement was sabotaged by the fact that a few of the women went to the police, and then it became a police investigation. And as I said, Mac Mitchell was charged, tried, and eventually convicted of rape of teenage Tibetan refugees and sentenced to a jail term. The jail term was 8 years, if I'm not mistaken, and he only served about 4 of it. So he was released after 4 years of jail time. So I presume he would have been released in the mid-1990s, mid to late 1990s, after being charged, tried, and convicted of rape in the early 1990s, if I'm not mistaken. So here's a case where, on the one hand, you do have women, almost certainly some Unitarian Universalist mothers, actually not covering up child sex abuse. Because, raping a teenage Tibetan refugee who's only 16, 17 years old, that's child sex abuse for sure. I don't know what the age of majority is in Massachusetts. I don't know what the minimum age for consensual sex is in Massachusetts. But I'm pretty sure that, raping a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, to say nothing of an 18-year-old, constitutes quite egregious child sex abuse. And did I forget to mention that Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell was married and had a wife at the time? So there's that as well. But in any case, so here's a case, a pretty good case where we can talk about some Unitarian Universalist mothers not covering up child abuse, but other Unitarian Universalist mothers, oh, there we go, yeah, we're still recording, actually trying to cover up and hide it. And I should speak about UUA Executive Vice President Kathleen K. Montgomery. She would have been Vice President of the Unitarian Universalist Association at the time. According to Kathleen K. Montgomery's job description, it includes coordinating the work of the legal counsel of the Unitarian Universalist Association. So Kathleen K. Montgomery, clearly a female Unitarian Universalist, possibly a mother, would have played a role in the cover-up of Reverend Mac, or the attempted cover-up of Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell's rape of teenage Tibetan refugees. And regardless of whether or not she did so at the time, back in the early 1990s, unfortunately, Kathleen K. Montgomery was the Executive Vice President of the Unitarian Universalist Association in 2012, when she coordinated the work of the Unitarian Universalist Association's Canadian attorney, Maître Marc-André Coulombe, which included falsely accusing me of blasphemous libel, a criminal act in the Canadian Criminal Code, basically Canada's anti-blasphemy law. You know, this was essentially incredibly hypocritical, hypocritical and shameful and abusive misuse of Canada's blasphemy law in Unitarian Universalist Association attempt to cover up and possibly even officially deny what the Maître Marc-André Coulombe described as such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape in the cease and desist demand letter, in which he falsely accused me of blasphemous libel in an effort to intimidate me into taking down blog posts that told the readily verifiable truth about Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell's rape of teenage Tibetan refugees. So regardless of whether or not Kathleen K. Montgomery participated in Unitarian Universalist cover-up, so yeah, that was definitely a positive honk and a wave. Basically, the guy had up a V for victory sign from what I could see in his car. May not be recorded in video, but I saw it with my eyes. So yeah, he was definitely holding up like two fingers in a V shape. Oh, yeah, it could stand for vice. Vice President of the Unitarian Universalist Association. It depends upon what the meaning of the word vice is. I do like these little double meanings. And yes, I do like to put the emphasis on vice when I talk about UUA Executive Vice President Kathleen K. Montgomery and her role in Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse cover-up and denial, which spans decades, because she was involved in Unitarian Universalist cover-up and denial of clergy sex abuse for at least 2 decades, and I'd say more like 3 decades. So yes, Kathleen K. Montgomery, I don't know if she was a mother or not, but she was most certainly deeply involved in Unitarian Universalist cover-up of clergy sex abuse, which includes sexual abuse of children. You know, and she probably would have been involved in other attempts to conceal sexual abuse by Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers and so on. You know, any time that the Unitarian Universalist Association resorted to use of its legal counsel, i.e. its lawyers and attorneys, to try to conceal sexual abuse, Kathleen K. Montgomery would have been supervising that. So you can be sure she supervised a fair bit of Unitarian Universalist cover-up and denial of clergy sex abuse in general, and more specifically sexual abuse of children by Unitarian Universalist ministers and Sunday school teachers, while she was Executive Vice President of the Unitarian Universalist Association. So we got someone looking at our picket sign here that speaks about how another Montgomery, Montreal Unitarian Sue Montgomery, is also involved in cover-up of Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse, and more specifically cover-up of child sex abuse committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers and Sunday school teachers, and indeed lay people. So let's see where we are here. We're coming to the end of a half-hour segment of video. Yeah, we got a few minutes left, maybe less than 4 minutes of video recording time here, but I just want to make sure we were still recording. So yes, that brings us to Sue Montgomery. Thank you. So I just got another thumbs up and a smile and a very good from a member of the public. So yeah, we're having a pretty good little Mother's Day protest here at the Unitarian Church of Montreal. And we're actually coming close to celebrating 20 years of protesting against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse of all kinds. My protest began sometime in May of 1998. I don't remember the exact date, but it was definitely in May where I began my protest. And shortly thereafter, there was a pretty good article in the Montreal Mirror by Jackie Charlton, which publicized my protest in a I believe the first issue of the Mirror in June of 1998. I think I'll track down that article and put the text up on my blog so people can read it. So I will be officially celebrating 20 years of protest against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse of all kinds, because it's not just sexual abuse, soon. But today I really wanted to dedicate things to cover-up of sexual abuse of children, specifically by Unitarian Universalist mothers. Mothers like Kathleen K. Montgomery, assuming she's a mother. I don't know for sure that she's a mother or not. I'm reasonably sure she is, but she might not be. But I will say Sue Montgomery is absolutely a mother. And I don't know if that's somebody waving at me or someone else. Could be someone else. Anyhow, we will have a little look at the camera here to see if it's still recording. Yeah, we got about a minute and a half left. So we're just going to let it come to the end of its half-hour recording time. And yeah, Church of the Image Tarnishing Ministers. I don't need to explain that too much, although I certainly can. There's more to it than meets the eye. But certainly all of those Unitarian Universalist ministers who engage in clergy sexual abuse, especially clergy sexual abuse of children, and are made public by the news, which is basically a fraction of the ones that actually do this stuff, because a lot of it is kept hidden. But those that make the news, as it were, do in fact tarnish the image of Unitarian Universalism, as do those Unitarian Universalist ministers who try to cover up and deny these things. And of course they tarnish the image of Unitarian Universalism in other ways. But we're trying to stick to the theme of child sex abuse cover-up and the involvement of Unitarian Universalist mothers in that today. That's today's theme. So let's see where we are here in terms of time. Okay, we're almost done. We're pretty well done here. So we're just going to zoom in here on this sign so it can be read as the camera winds down.